How is it enlightening to know the order of the recitations? Why would we care? Why would we
Well, because historically, people would then develop a kind of historicizing argument about the order of the revelations came in such and such, so you see a certain development of thought or something like that. From the Muslim point of view, it is a different importance, because since it's all from God, it would all be timeless and there wouldn't be any necessity of one thing being more important than another, except for the principle of abrogation, which is based on Surah 2, verse 106, that says if we cause a revelation, if we abrogate a revelation or cause it to be forgotten, we bring a better one than it, or something, or its equivalent. And that is taken as referring to specific verses being abrogated or canceled. And so the whole study of that became a major area of Quranic exegesis, and therefore it became very important to the Muslims by the 3rd century of Islam to know what the order of the revelations were. But by that time, it wasn't possible generally to know the order any longer, and as a result, there was a lot of argument about that. Now, sometimes in a general way, the order of revelations can be seen, but a specific way it cannot be seen. Here we have to mention the overall character of the Quranic text. This is absolutely necessary. The Quran has often been deemed a confusing, difficult, and incomprehensible book, which was the exact phrase used by the French philosopher Voltaire in describing his experience of reading the Quran. Not that he may have been helped by the versions that were available in French in his day, but today there is a counter trend that tends to see the Quran as more of a unity than it was viewed before. The Muslims themselves caused the Quran to not be viewed entirely as a unity, because in the criticism that was meant to permit the elaboration of abrogation doctrines, that a certain verse canceled another verse's effect. And that became very elaborate at one point in medieval Muslim history. It was often asserted that each verse came down for a specific reason. So you can find a discourse in the Quran where the verses are obviously related, and yet there are some traditions that say verse A came down at such and such a time, and verse B with reference to something else, and verse C with reference to something else, in an order like that. And there's a tendency or a trend among modern Muslims to go back on all of that and to discountenance that and to view the Quran as a greater unity, and to view the surahs in the Quran as being more unified than that kind of teaching would allow. And anyhow, the environment of Arabia was an oral environment in spite of surrounding civilization. And there was fairly little writing that was in circulation in Arabia itself, although, as you can see from reading the Quranic text that refers to book and books and so on, there obviously was some writing. And the environment overall was oral. The word Qur'an means the recitation. The Qur'an was meant to be recited orally. It still is recited orally. Today, Qur'an reciters have their tapes and their CDs for sale, just like popular music, and it competes with popular music. Many pious people will only listen to the Quran and won't listen to music at all. And many people then they will sit around and discuss the merits of various reciters, just like someone would be discussing the merits of art of whatever kind. And the idea that the Quran is the recited Quran, that is overwhelmingly important. The transmission of the Quran down to this day is entirely an oral transmission. That is, of course, there are written texts, but for the Muslims, the written texts do not have the authority of the oral transmission. Once when I was in Jordan and I was meeting about 20 of the religious scholars of Islam in the University of Jordan, And they had asked me many questions about Islam in America and so on. And then they said, well, we asked you, would you like to ask us something? And I said, yes, we have an argument in our community about authority. And some people are saying, well, did you study this book with some sheikh who has studied it with a sheikh which goes back in unbroken chain to the original writer? Do you have to do that to be able to use a book, or can you just pick up a book and read it and talk about it? And they laughed and they said, well, of course, nowadays, if everyone expected everyone else to have studied with someone and to present their proofs of authority every time they spoke, we wouldn't get anywhere. It would be impossible. So of course you can go read a book. But then the one who was specialized in the Qur'an said that is true, that you can take, written transmission of things, but not with the Qur'an. The Qur'an has an oral transmission that is down to the present time, has very strict standards when the kids memorize it, and they usually memorize it as kids. And I'm sorry that in my own case, I didn't put more effort into memorizing it. I have memorized about 30% of the text, but people will spend a lot of effort on that, memorizing it, and then the test will come up. And I asked my friends who have memorized the whole text, and how were you tested in Saudi Arabia and in Morocco and so on? And they said, well, let's see, there's one test is that you sit with your sheikh and you recite the entire text to him from memory. And I said, do you mean they don't make you just recite part of it? No, you have to recite the whole thing. Otherwise, you don't get the certificate for that. And then in Morocco, somebody said, well, in Morocco, you can also write out the whole text longhand, the entire book, and that will pass you. And in the former test, where you have to recite the whole thing to your sheikh, and then after that, you go in front of a committee of several sheikhs, including the director of the university, of the college and the university, the dean, I guess it would be, you'd say. And you have to, there they will test you, and they'll say a few words of a verse, and you have to complete it accurately on the spot. And so it's taken very seriously, the degree to which you transmit the text in written form, in oral form. And the orality of the text is very important if you're going to get anything out of it and understand it. It is like Herodotus in Greek, but it's more like Homer. Because Homer is the foundational writing in Greek, and it's very strange writing. It has its own form of Greek that isn't quite like any other Greek. Same with the Qur'an, not quite like any other Arabic. It is the foundational document, the first thing in that language that's written down. It's written in splendid isolation way before anything else gets written, because Homer is thought to be 150 years before anything else, well, except for Hesiod, maybe. And there's great uncertainty about the exact dates of that in case of Homer and so. And it is clearly oral. When you look at all of the work of Milman Parry and such people that worked in the oral tradition of Greek and oral poetry, and how oral poetry differs from written and civilizational poetry, the oral aspect cannot be denied or overlooked at all. And that is an important aspect. This was delivered orally, and that has to be understood clearly.